Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, Germany is heading into a pivotal federal election, with economic stagnation, immigration concerns, and security debates dominating the campaign. The outcome could significantly reshape Germany's leadership and its role in Europe. As the largest economy in the EU, Germany's political direction will have far-reaching consequences for the bloc and its neighbors. What should we expect from this election, and how could it shape the future of Europe? Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this is Janusz Reiter, former Polish ambassador to the United States. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. To the US and to Germany.
And to Germany as well, of course. And first of all, can you help us set the backdrop of how significant is this election in shaping Germany's future leadership and its role within the European Union?
It is important because it is about, unblocking the country. The country has been blocked for a long time, economically and politically. And this is, of course, it matters in Europe. Germany is expected to help solve European problems and not to add its own problems to those that other countries have. And Germany has not played this role in the past years. And second, it is important for Poland for many reasons. Economically, the Polish economy is strongly integrated with the German economy, especially the automotive sector, not only, but especially the automotive sector. Politically, Germany is maybe the defining partner in the world, and especially in Europe for Poland. It is also, unfortunately, part of Polish domestic politics. This makes Germany so important. And this is why, one can only hope that Germany will get, as I said, unblocked, and the country will bring in its energy to Europe, and that at a point of time when there are severe doubts about the future of Europe, about the future of the Western world.
Right, you brought up a very good point here, being hopefully that Germany will be able to be, like I mentioned, unblocked and to solve some of the European issues instead of adding to it. Now, my question would be on the coalition building possibly that is going to go forward. Do you think that there is the concern about the coalition being pretty much the same parties, even though perhaps there's a different distribution of how many seats each party will obtain, that people might feel like, hey, even after the election, we are seeing the same people in charge all over again?
The election campaign was interesting, but it was different from the previous election campaigns. It was a little tougher. It was more divisive. There was more real disputes in this election campaign, which was not the case in the previous election campaigns in Germany. There was too much consensus in Germany. There was too much national unity, and this is not good for the democracy. And the result was the rise of the far-right AfD, the party that claimed to be the only party to talk about the issues that the parties of the establishment did want to talk about. This will hopefully change. In the election campaign, there was a lot of criticism. There were some very hard debates. Well, of course, at the end of the day, there will be two, maybe even three, but most likely two parties which will have to form the coalition. And the number of options available is not very big. The most likely option is a coalition between the CDU-CSU and the SPD, which is in Germany often called a grand coalition. There were several grand coalitions in the past. I don't believe that this is the best solution for the country, but there is no best solution. There is only a solution that can work. The alternative would be a coalition between CDU-CSU and the Green Party. These are the two options that are realistic. Both are not bad, but there are, of course, some differences between CDU-CSU and the SPD. SPD is, I would say, more traditionalist. CDU-CSU today is a party that wants to give a little bit more power to the German politics, wants to more courage in addressing the critical issues of the country. One of the critical issues is migration, at least in the perception of the German people. This is a critical issue, and I believe that unless the new German government regains confidence of the people by addressing the question of migration, the government will not have enough mandate to solve the other problems, which is, well, the future of Germany's policy on Ukraine, on Russia, which is the future of the transatlantic relationship, and so on and so on.
Right, so a lot of these topics are actually connected in a way that people probably aren't realizing as of the moment. Now, you also mentioned the rise of the AfD party. There's something interesting that I want to ask you about, because we saw US's Elon Musk as well as J.D. Vance pretty much putting their support behind the AfD party. Do you think that the results of this election can be a litmus test to see whether or not the US politicians have any sway when it comes to European politics?
I think there are enough reasons in Germany itself to explain the rise of the AfD. I don't think that the interventions by Elon Musk and other people from the US have changed a lot. I believe that I think this is a horrible mistake that they made, but I don't think that this mistake will change the domestic situation in Germany. You know, such interventions from other countries usually don't help. Sometimes they are counterproductive. In this case, they are not counterproductive, but they will not help very much. But the almost crazy thing is that AfD is not only a nationalist party, it is in its core an anti-Western and anti-American party. So and now this party being supported from the US, this is something is wrong about that. But I don't think that this will be a game changer in the election.
Right, and like you mentioned, the AfD is not just like an anti-EU, but also like an anti-American party. But a lot of people have their perception that somehow they're the only ones that is voicing some of the concerns. Do you think that has to do with what you mentioned earlier, perhaps the lack of confidence in the current government? And do you think that this election cycle might be able to shake that perception off?
That's exactly what's at stake. And that was exactly why Mr. Merz, Friedrich Merz, took a tougher position, because he wanted the German people to feel that there is someone who takes care of the problems, and the problems are not left to the AfD. This was sometimes controversial, but I think it was absolutely right. The entire career of the AfD is based on, on the perception that the parties of the so-called establishment have created a kind of cartel of parties that are not willing to address some critical issues, especially the issue of migration. And the AfD claimed that they were the only party to have the courage to speak out about what the German people worry about. This is why this issue is so important. Once it is, I don't want to say solved, because you cannot solve this problem it's in short time, but you can make people understand that someone controls the situation, and this is the loss of control. That was the major issue. And in Germany, where people traditionally have strong confidence in the government, in the state, but this was shocking. There are other countries where people do not expect the government so much from the government. In Germany, they do, and the feeling that the government has lost control over the borders, over the border movements, this has, of course, contributed to the rise of the AfD. This can be changed, and I think the new governments will have a good opportunity to change it.
All right, and speaking of new government, can you help us break down some of the, well, you already told us about the possible coalition that could be built, but what does that mean for countries like Ukraine as well as Germany's neighbors in the European Union? How do you think any change in the coalition will affect the foreign policies?
No, of course there is a challenge, but this challenge is not. That's not the current situation in Europe. The challenge comes from the U.S. This is the question of how much future the West has, how much future the European integration and NATO have, and this is, so to speak, the political business model of Germany. This has been the political business model of Germany for 80 years or 70 years. Germany has been based on the integration, on the European and transatlantic integration. If the Germans cannot rely anymore on these two pillars, well, this will open new questions. But the election result will not change anything, and if then more positively in the German policy on Ukraine, on Russia. Friedrich Merz is a strong Atlanticist. He's committed to the transatlantic alliance, but the problem is we don't know whether the US is still committed to the transatlantic alliance. But he will work hard to convince the Americans, to convince President Trump that NATO is not just good for Europe, that the US needs NATO. And I think he has a certain credibility. He is a strong supporter of Ukraine, and he's a strong critic of Russia. This will not change.
And do you think this credibility will be able to carry him to at least give the United States a different perception about how European countries are interacting with NATO? We do know one of the stronger criticism is that perhaps Germany is not putting enough. Do you think that with a new leader in the helm that would change anytime soon?
Germany was not doing enough. The current German Chancellor, he will, maybe this may be his last day as Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, proclaimed, as you know, the so-called Zeitenwende, the turning point. The Germans started investing more in their defense. They have to do much more. And Merz knows that. And the SPD knows that too. The problem may only be that many of the voters of the SPD don't like this idea, while the voters of the CDU-CSU fully support this idea. So I hope there is no doubt Germany will be doing more. Will Germany be doing enough? I don't know that. I hope yes, and I hope also very much that Germany will be doing that in cooperation with their neighbors. Here, especially with Poland, because of geography, because the difference between territorial defense and alliance defense in today's situation is absurd. It doesn't make any sense. So the Germans should invest in Poland's defense capabilities, and by doing so, they would be investing in their own security. And I hope that more cooperation, and deeper cooperation, will be possible between Poland and Germany.
Right, we'll see how the election shapes out. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.